What up? It's Skullflower. Welcome back to Producer Therapy, Episode 3. Let's talk about writer's block. Okay, so writer's block. What is this crap? We've all felt it, we've all dealt with it, and there's really nothing quite as discouraging as opening up a fresh, brand new project. Some of the best advice I've gotten is to just start making stuff, even if it sucks, like objectively sucks. Just get something down so you can massage it into something that doesn't suck. And yeah, that tends to work for me pretty well, but there's gotta be a bit more going on behind the scenes. I mean, that advice only works when it comes to starting something new. So what happens when you're stuck on something you already have? Why do we get so blocked up in all these different scenarios? Or here's another zinger. What does it mean if you don't even want to write something? Like you want to have a new song, but you just don't feel like making it. Like you just want the results to just magically appear and then boom, you have a new song. So what does that mean? Well, it means that you're not a real artist and everything you've done is invalid.
Wow.
No, I'm just kidding, of course. But if you're an artist, I'm sure that joke actually kind of hit in some way. Most artists have told themselves that at some point and regularly feel that way. Call it imposter syndrome if you want, but pretty much every creative person has come to that point where they feel like their lack of current ideas invalidates everything that they've done in their portfolio thus far. So let's talk a little bit about the history of writer's block before we get into my own analysis of the condition. Okay, so according to Dr. Mauricio Castillo of the American Journal of Neuroradiology, writer's block as a term was coined in 1947 by this Austrian psychiatrist named Dr. Edmund Bergler. Apparently this dude is really into Freud and stuff. He laid the blame at oral masochism and a milk-denying mother. I also found this article from Joyce Kincaid talking about all the different types of gods that have been associated with writing throughout history, from the Sumerians and the Egyptians to the ancient Chinese peoples and the Indians and the Mayans, all that. So there's been a ton of historical association that writing comes from something divine and outside the body of the artist. Pretty sure Rick Rubin also talks about that. Conspiracy, maybe? So she argues that there's all this spirituality surrounding the topic because it's easier to understand why the words won't come out when you can place the blame on something divine or something more abstract. And in even more recent history, John McPhee had said about writer's block that it puts some writers down for months, it puts some writers down for life. Context, this dude started writing for The New Yorker in 1963, apparently, so that's crazy. All that being said, I think it's pretty well established that writer's block definitely happens to everybody at some point, and there's a historical basis for that fact. I'm also pretty sure that all those people are still considered writers, so the next time that you're feeling like a fake artist, please understand that that doesn't invalidate your catalog. Everyone gets it, always has, unfortunately probably always will. So one last thing that I wanted to note from Dr. Castillo's article about the topic, he said, the notion of writer's block is disdained by younger members of academia, but seems to gain respect. What the hell was that? He said, the notion of writer's block is disdained by younger members of academia, but seems to gain respect at higher levels where it occurs more commonly, which honestly makes a ton of sense. I remember when I was just starting out, I had a gajillion ideas that never seemed to end. Kind of like how the oil and gas industry thinks that fossil fuel drilling sites don't dry up. They do. But now that I'm comfortably over a decade into this little music thing that I do, it actually hits me much more frequently than I remember it ever hitting me when I was younger. I mean, even right now I'm banging out scripts for YouTube videos, but I haven't been able to make a good song in a couple weeks. So even for me, reading this is honestly pretty validating. Before doing the script, I honestly kind of felt like I was afraid of losing the sauce that I just feel like I got a hold of. So anyway, chapter 2. So when you get diagnosed with something medical, the first step is really to kind of understand what it is that's afflicting you. I've taken a lot of time to think about this topic over the past couple of years. Like when I feel this artistic constipation, what's really happening from a procedural standpoint. So I came up with this theoretical model of the whole psychological process behind this. So in order to understand what writer's block is, we have to understand what writing is.
On your mark, get set. We're writing on the internet.
Overall, it's a pretty simple process taking something from the abstract and bringing it into reality. It's structured kind of like a vocal processing chain or some other kind of signal flow. On this side, you have some kind of input, whether that's a song that you really like, an experience you had, some kind of external variable. It can really be pretty much anything. But it doesn't really turn into usable data for you, the artist here, to process into an idea right away. Then on the other side, there's the output. That's really two parts. There's the development and execution phases of creating something, and then the actual final product, the song, artwork, article, whatever it is that you're making. And of course, the most complex part comes last, the artists themselves. The artist is like the conduit through which this in-to-out processing occurs, like the CPU of this whole art creation computer analogy. So when the process is working fluidly, something happens on the left here, like you hear a really cool song you think does something interesting. Then it comes into your mind where that experience is digested and you come up with a basic idea to do something similar but with your own twist on it. You draw from other experiences you had from this internal like to dislike data set, and you form this idea of doing a similar song to the input and then approaching it with the grand total of all your previous experiences and hopefully coming out the other end with something cool, in theory. So now, the artist, the CPU stage, clicks on and there's this degree of excitement. And then we come to the development and execution stage. That excitement acts as like the main fuel source for this part of the machine. The idea or conceptual design is creating this excitement fuel and dumping that into the moving parts of the manufacturing process, where you start putting some drums into the project, start tweaking settings and moving stuff around and checking back and forth between the blueprint that you had and what's happening on the page. Finally, when all that development and manufacturing process is nearing the end and you have a full prototype of the song, you spend a little bit of time determining how much the result matches the initial level of excitement that the concept generated. Once that metric passes a certain threshold, you're now excited to share that project, hopefully, and then you get into the distribution stage, which is a whole different topic and process. But the point is, throughout this model, we've gone from an experience, like hearing something new and interesting, all the way to a final-ish product as an output.
I like what I see. That's good.
So where is this writer's block coming from? A lot of people define it as a lack of inspiration, or at least that's what it feels like. But let's be honest here. A lot of times that you're experiencing a block, the situation could be a million different shades of gray. Maybe you don't have inspiration, or maybe you do and you just don't have the energy to execute it. Or maybe you do have the energy and it's just not working, so you give up. And inspiration itself is such an abstract concept that barely gets talked about either. We generally assume that everybody understands what it is innately, so we don't need to define it. But what's the mechanism behind inspiration? Letting these kinds of concepts stay mystified is what gives them their power. It's easy to blame your lack of output on a lack of inspiration because it doesn't really mean anything, and it kind of removes the onus of explaining the problem to yourself. But when you really come down to analyzing the situation, defining inspiration is important. And honestly, at the end of the day, it's just excitement with a creative flavor. I mean, if you're not excited by something enough to make something out of it, then you're not inspired. That simple. So there's really no need to treat it like some big abstract unattainable concept. So how does this play into the diagnosis of writer's block? Is it a lack of inspiration? I mean, sometimes, but not always. Writer's block and a lack of inspiration obviously are correlated, but they're well and truly their own things. And this misconception happens all the time, and often it can prolong your experience of writer's block if inspiration isn't actually the issue. So what do I mean by this? Writer's block is a result of something anywhere in this chain being f***ed up. Are you finding new records that you like? Are you cramped up in a dark cave, isolating yourself from all your life's experiences? Are you working so many hours you don't even have time to let yourself experience media? Maybe you're an audio engineer by trade like me, and you've been spending so many hours working on music that you kinda don't enjoy, and you're stuffing your input buffer with unenjoyable music. Who knows? Or possibly, your processing stage is all f***ed up. Are you experiencing psychological distress in general? Maybe you have a good idea of what you want to do, and you're finding inspiration from something, but you're feeling all f***ed up and you can't get your head right at the moment. For me, this is where most of my writer's block comes from these days. I have a lot of issues with dissociation, depression, overstimulation, brain fog from my post-COVID syndrome, and I generally have a lot of things on my plate at any given time being self-employed. It's not particularly conducive to my mental well-being all the time, but of course things come and go in waves. And don't worry about me, I got this. But yeah, those kinds of things can get me feeling a bit spaghetti-brained, and I can't really write anything while I'm dealing with a time management plus existential crisis all tweaked into one. And I can't really blame myself for that or get upset when I haven't written something incredible because of it. Sometimes I just have bigger things to deal with than making dubstep. It could also be an issue with your execution stage. Maybe you're in the right headspace to create, and you have a good idea that you're excited about, and all the stars have aligned on the left-hand side of this whole system, but you just don't yet have the skills or the resources to execute what you want to execute. So this stage causes a lot of problems for a lot of people, everything from stress overflowing back into the processing stage and making you have a mental health crisis because you feel stupid for not having the skills yet, all the way to just simply adding friction to the process and the results being not quite what you wanted to make. So how do you remedy these things? Well, of course, you first have to find the problem, just like in any other systems diagnostic. I mean, you can't just blame the weather and hope it works tomorrow when your toaster oven doesn't want to do its thing. So first, find out where the breakdown is, and then see what you can do about them. You don't have an idea? Okay, maybe go live your life for a little bit, or stop trying to make something specific and just start twisting knobs. Who knows? Just make weird sounds and see what happens. Maybe you get something great out of it. Or you could just spend some time working on your technical abilities, learn about DSP, learn about whatever. You don't have to be making a song to be making music, you know what I mean? Learn some nerd stuff, because if you do all that kind of stuff and you get some extra abilities, maybe when you do feel creative later, you can apply them. So, and sometimes some of these things aren't like immediately addressable either. Like if you're in the middle of a mental health crisis, you know, probably the best thing you can do is focus on managing that. I mean, music will still be here when you come back to Earth. I mean, the best thing you can do at that point is to try not to like shit yourself for not producing material. I mean, maybe look at your diet, your sleep habits, talk to like a medical professional if you have somebody available to you. Just see what you can do to get that managed properly first, and not from a YouTube fake psychiatrist who just makes music, from like a real doctor that's like accredited. Or if your work-life balance isn't really allowing you the space to be creative, I mean, adjust it if you can. And if you can't, I mean, the best thing you can do at that point is just not be super mean to yourself because you don't have the time to do it. But I mean, sometimes just knowing what the holdup is can be enough to like alleviate some of the stress that comes with this issue. Anyway, overall, I think looking at writer's block from this kind of perspective is an incredibly useful tool in managing your expectations of yourself and being able to be practical and reasonable about your work. Remembering that this process is like a complex multi-stage system can really put into perspective where you're at in the process while you're struggling. And I found that thinking about it like this and truly understanding the creative process, at least the way I experience it, it's helped me remove like a significant amount of pressure and doubt. In my eyes, any healthy tool that you have at your disposal for easing that pressure is a pretty useful one to have in your kit. Don't let writer's block be this divine, untouchable, unstoppable force that stops you from using your creative voice. It's frustrating, upsetting, and shitty to deal with, but it's not the end of you being an artist. You will write something again when all of those parts do align, and you will make something that you're happy with. And there will be a day where you feel like you're on fire with unlimited sauce, as long as you can recognize that there is a balance that must exist. There's going to be days where art feels like a language you've never heard before and you're stuck in a conversation, and then the other unlimited sauce days. So if you can get yourself comfortable with understanding that and being okay with that, and knowing when it's okay to step away for a second and address other things, then you can absolutely get yourself to a place where you feel confident in your creative output again, and when you don't write, you realize that you'll be able to pick it up. Anyway, thanks for coming back to the channel if you've seen my earlier episodes, and if this is your first time here, thanks for joining up. I just wanted to take a second to say thank you for anybody that's reached this far in the video. I've gotten a ton of really positive comments and awesome feedback on my previous videos, and it really makes me happy beyond explanation. I feel like there hasn't been a voice in like the artist or musician community that's talked about these kinds of things in an open format like this, and it's really sick to see that there's like a real life positive impact that happens when you do talk about it. I didn't want to just make another channel about like tutorials or like how to make basses and stuff. I mean, I do want to do those videos too, but doing stuff like this, I feel like is slightly more important. So yeah, if these videos are providing you with value, let me know in the comments below what bits stuck out to you as the most important and the most helpful. And also, if you have ideas for what I should address in the future, that's also the place to tell me to. Please don't forget to subscribe and keep your eyes open for new music dropping soon. Also, if you're interested in more technical videos about the stuff that I'm doing, I'm going to be opening up a Patreon very shortly with a ton of different assets for everybody. So sample packs, impulse response packs, serum patches, wavetables, track breakdowns, all that good stuff. Keep punching my mic every video. I think it's like a classic thing now at this point. But yeah, Patreon's coming soon. Don't feel pressured, but there's a bunch of like assets that I think will be super useful for any type of producer. Honestly, it's a lot of samples. So check that out when it's out. I'll definitely be posting a video announcing all that officially. So that's all for today. Thanks for sticking around, and we'll see you next time. Peace.